Test 1, 2. Okay, dropping frames. Give it a sec. Camera's working fine. Test 1, 2. Test 1, 2. Okay. It's working fine. Great. Let's go ahead and get started. Alright, so I kind of did like 10 minutes last night. And I ended up falling asleep. So let's see. We read all of this. Gentlemen. Thomas Smith Gent, in praise of the work. Alright. Necessary observations belonging to the lute and lute playing by Giambattista Bastardo of Bisonti, with choice variety of lute lessons, partly invented and partly collected out of the best authors by John. Passion of practicing on the lute, such as I could gather out of the observations of the famous divine Laurentinus, others, and my own. I don't know what that word is. Comprehended in a few rules which I have here set out with as much care and diligence as I possibly could, by which thou myself more easily obtained the right practice on the lute. Okay. Let me look up this word. Laurentinus. Laurentinus. Oh, Laurentius. Wait, it says here, or by extension, laurelled, or crowned with laurel, symbolizing victory, honor, and achievement, deriving from the Latin laurus, laurel. It's the original form of popular names like Lawrence, Lorenzo, and Lorenz, famously linked to Saint Lawrence, a Christian martyr, giving its historical and religious significance. So, what's this? Oh. Observations of the famous and divine Laurentius, other and my own, comprehended in a few rules which I have here set out with as much care and diligence as I possibly could, by which thou myself more easily obtain the right practice on the lute. Okay, so pretty much, few rules here, that work. Take therefore this work of mine in good part, whosoever thou art, that readest it, with a mind to profit thyself. Yet think not I set it forth to the end to draw thee away from the lively teaching of thy Meister. Okay, so this is not, so far he's saying, this is not to take you away from the teachings of your teacher, whose speech doth fair exceed all writing, right? Because speech over is superior to writing, I guess. Or sorry, I was skipping lines. Or presume to teach those which are meisters in the art themselves, and the art these trivial ways. All right, so basically this is not, this part of it, he's saying this is not to teach the teachers, he's being very humble here. But I offer help to young beginners and such as oftentimes want a teacher, which it will not be unpleasing for them to use. Which it will not be unpleasing for them to use. Is he talking about availability or maybe difficult teachers? but I offer help to young beginners and such as oftentimes want a teacher, which it will not be unpleasing for them to use. When they find themselves wearied with those difficulties which lightly befall young learners. Hang on, let me read that again. My reading skills are like zero right now, because I'm a dumb guitar player. I'm lucky to have half a brain cell on a good day. Here we go. And that's a long sentence too. So let me be a bit of a grammar Nazi and say, he needs some periods in here somewhere. Let me read that again. It actually starts here. Take therefore this work of mine in good part, whosoever thou art that readeth it, with a mind to profit thyself. Yet think not I set forth to the end to draw thee away from the lively teaching of thy master, whose speech doth far exceed all writing, and presume to teach those which are meisters in the art, or presume to teach those which are meisters in the art these trivial ways. But I offer help to the young beginners, and such as oftentimes want a teacher, which it will not be unpleasing for them to use, when they find themselves worried with those difficulties which lightly befall young learners. Okay. Yeah, I think we pretty much get it. Neither would I have thee think that in this detract from other differing ways which other men do use, not unsightly, so that there are reasons for them, and an easy gracefulness in them. So basically he's saying, there is no one set way of doing things. Other people might do different things for different reasons. Let's see. For a man may come to the same place diverse ways. And that sweet harmony of the lute, the habit whereof we do daily affect with so great travail. Hang on, let me look that up. I might be misreading it. Okay, yeah, travail. I've never encountered this word before, to be honest. English is not my first language, by the way. Travail is a misspelling of travail, travailer, noun. Travail means difficult or painful work, toil or suffering. In French, the verb travailer means to work. Oh, right. Yeah, okay. So it's not even an English word to begin with. Okay, that's cool. Where was I? To great travail. May strike our ears with an elegant delight, though the hand be diversely applied. Yet know as I am free from all such ambition, so that I would with all my heart have given thee the habit and power to play well, rather than the means of learning to play, if it were possible to be had without labor. Okay. Yeah, he's a very humble dude, or at least in writing he is. Cool. Whosoever therefore will use these are rules, if he be wholly raw in the art. Above all other things, let him persuade himself that the knowledge of this art, though it be hard, yet it is easily to be obtained by him that is in this sort conditioned. First, if he have no great defect, and have that natural desire towards music, which hath been the founder of excellence in every art. Secondly, if he slid himself in his learning with such labor and exercise that is moderate and continual, not such unreasonable pains as many do weary themselves with. Thirdly, if he be patient for a good long time, for commonly this brings us, whether we will or not, to the highest of the sciences. To these, if he adorn the industrious and lively instructions of a teacher, that is, a good artist, he cannot but hope for a reasonable habit in a short time. If therefore thou shalt be thus qualified and minded, and want a teacher, whom indeed would rather with thee first. Okay. If therefore thou shalt be thus qualified and minded, and want a teacher, with whom indeed I would rather with thee. So he's saying basically it's better to get a teacher, I guess. But he's providing this source for you in case you don't have access to a teacher, or if you don't, whatever, So now we're getting into necessary observations from here on forward. So this little chapter or paragraph, to choose a lute for a learner. So this is going to be very interesting. I'm curious what it is, because oftentimes we see these videos like, okay, if you're a beginner, instrumentalist, whatever, how do you choose the instrument? What do you look for? What price point? What qualities? What are you going to be using it for? So forth, so on. So this is basically no different. The 16th century or 17th century version of that. Yeah, 17th century. This is 1610 of those videos, pretty much. So let's see what he says. To choose a lute for a learner, beginner lute. Okay, first and foremost, choose a lute neither great nor small, but a middling one, such as shalt fit thine hand and thine own judgment. Right, that's right. They didn't have the J right back then, so IU is going to be, the I is going to be used for a J in many cases. Thy own judgment. Yet I had rather thou didst practice at first on a lute that were somewhat greater and harder, unless thy hand is very short, because that is good to stretch the fin with. I'm guessing he's saying fingers here. Fingers, stretch the sin. Or is that supposed to be an S? Sinews. Stretch the sinews. I think it's sinews. Let me look it up. Okay, sinews is an older spelling, Middle English, for sinew, referring to the strong tendon connecting muscle and bone, but it also metaphorically means strength, power, resilience, or essential force behind something. Okay, so he's talking about the muscles. Where was that? Stretch the sinews, stretch the muscles, which are in no sort to be slackened. For there are which do sometimes without lute forcibly pull and lengthen their fingers. Others there are. Okay, hang on. Before I keep going. So this first part right here. First and foremost, choose a lute neither great nor small, but a middling one. So an appropriately sized lute for yourself. Something that's going to fit in your hand, and basically something that you get a sense for, for yourself as far as your proportions go. Yet I had rather thou did practice at first on a lute that were somehow greater and harder. Okay, so he's suggesting a slightly bigger lute, and by harder, maybe he means, I guess it could mean, size of it, because when an instrument is rather large, it can be kind of hard to play. Maybe he's talking about action as well. I don't know. If the strings are a little high, it's going to be hard to press down, and if he's leading this sentence to raising strength in your muscles. He might be referring to that as well. Then again, it'd be, I guess that's not quite correct of me to think, a lute with higher action. Because Paul Odette himself has said, that just because they're older instruments and they seem cruder doesn't mean that they were stupid and that they were using super high action. I mean, these people, they were going for lower actions just as much as we are today. Action on the strings, I mean. So, yeah, I guess he's just referring to size itself, size of the neck. Lute that were somewhat greater and harder, unless the hand be very short. Okay, unless you have very small fingers, like a kid or something, because that is good to stretch. Because it is good to stretch the sinews, which are in no sort to be slackened. Okay, so you cannot slack the fingers. You have to develop strength in your fingers. For there are which do sometimes, without a lute, forcibly pull and lengthen their fingers. Okay, let's read the next part. Others there are that laying their hand on a table or some like thing do spread their fingers as broad as they can possibly. Others there are that laying their hand on a table or some like thing do spread their fingers as broad as they possibly can. Hang on, I'm trying that on my table. Okay. Others there are that oftentimes anoint their fingers with oil or oil of tartar. Others there are that oftentimes anoint their fingers with oil of tartar. Interesting. So they were putting tartar oil? Hang on, let me look up tartar oil. Oil of tartar, an archaic term for cream of tartar, a fine powder, potassium bitartrate left over from wine making, used in baking to stabilize egg whites, activating baking soda, or leavening, and prevent sugar crystallization. It's not a liquid oil, but an acidic salt that helps create light meringues, of fluffy cakes. Okay, so pretty much, for there are those which do sometimes, without a lute, forcibly pull and lengthen their fingers. Okay, so those without a lute, I guess they would do stretches or something. Others that are oftentimes anoint their fingers. Others there are that laying their hand on a table or some like thing do spread their fingers as broad as they possibly can. Okay, so basically stretching, something like this maybe, I think he's describing. Others there are that oftentimes anoint their fingers with oil of tartar, so powdering the fingers or something like that. Maybe in this time, 17th century, they did mean some kind of liquid, oil, although Google says it's really more of a powder for now. So who knows? Though I know the use thereof is good to make a nimble hand, rather by the often report of many others than, though I know the use thereof is good to make a nimble hand, rather by the often report of many others, than by any approved experience of my own. What? God damn it. They're so wordy. I don't think they really spoke like this. Okay. Though I know the use thereof is good to make a nimble hand, okay, even though this is good for the fingers, rather by often report, as reported by many others, than by any approved experience of. Okay, so this is basically stuff that he has heard. It's not stuff that he has done himself, basically. It's just a recommendation based on what works for other lute players, other beginner lute players, I guess. Howsoever, it is most necessary, at least for the beginner, to handle the lute often, yet never but when thy genius favors thee. What? When thy genius favors thee, that is, when thou feeleth thyself inclined to music. Okay, so when your musical mood strikes you when you're in a state of musical flow, basically, I guess. Howsoever, it's most necessary that the beginner handle the lute often. So play it as much as you can. Yet never but when thy genius favor thee. Yet never except when. So I guess he's saying play it, when you really feel like playing it. Don't play it unnecessarily. Don't play it when you don't feel like playing it, which is actually good advice. If you kind of force yourself to play an instrument, you kind of start developing a hatred for it, in a sense. For there is a certain natural disposition for learning the art naturally infused into us, and showing it in us rather at one time than another, which if one will provoke by immoderate labor, he shall fight against nature. Yeah, so basically what I just said, don't force yourself to play. Therefore, when thou shalt find thyself aptly disposed. Okay, aptly disposed. Okay, that makes sense. Hang on, let me make sure that is a word that I'm not making shit up. A manner that is appropriate or suitable. Okay, so circumstance. Good. Aptly disposed, and has time and opportunity. Spare no pains, yet keep this course. Okay. Yeah, so play whenever you feel like playing. Don't force yourself. What lesson to begin with all? So to choose a lute. Okay, so he kind of went into a little bit of choosing a lute, something that fits well in your hand. He talked about some things that people do, kind of stretch their hands or whatever to warm up for it, whether stretching the fingers like so, maybe on a table, or putting some like powder on them, something like that. And then he said, don't force yourself to play it when the mood strikes you, basically. All right, so what lesson to begin with all? Choose one lesson thyself according to thy capacity, which give not over by looking over others, or straggling from one to another, till thou have got it reasonably perfect. And do not only begin it by going through it to the end at first sight, but examine each part of it diligently, and stay upon any one point so long, though thou play it over 1,000 times, till thou get it in some sort. Okay, so let's stop right there. Choose a lesson thyself according to thy capacity. Okay, so choose something reasonable for yourself, nothing too advanced, maybe not too easy. I guess easy is okay. But basically know your limits, know where you're at, basically. Which give not over by looking over others, or struggling from one to another. So stick to one. Do not go from one to another. If you're having difficulty, you get frustrated, it's like, okay, maybe I'll try another one. Basically, so he's saying be diligent about what you choose, and know what you're choosing, and be intentional in your choosing a certain lesson here. Or struggling from one to another. to thou have got it reasonably perfect. Yeah, so don't move on to another piece till you're pretty much perfect at it. And do not only begin it by going through to it and is. Yeah, so don't just sight read it and then just move on. He's pretty much talking about chunking and chaining here, and look at each part of it diligently. And I think by part, examine each part of it diligently. What does he really mean by each part? Is he talking about the voice part, breaking up the horizontal lines? Is he talking about the sections? Is he talking about phrases? That's interesting. And stay upon any one point so long, though thou play it over 1,000 times. Play one thing a million times if you need to thou get it in some sort, until you get it. The like you shall do in all parts of the said song, till you shall find yourself prettily seen in it. It will not little help you to get without book. For whilst the mind is busy searching here and there for that which is written, the hand is more unapt to perform the note in all the difficulty of the lute hath, which for the most part is imputed to the fingers, should rather be attributed to the variety of the rules which are in respect to be observed, all which do rather depend upon the mind than on the hand. Okay, this is so fucking wordy. This is basically 2 sentences here. Look at this. Here's a period, and here's the next period. Run-on sentences, man. I'll give you 1 second. Some sort. The like you shall do in all parts of the said song, till you shall find yourself prettily seen in it. Right, so if you do something in one part, if you spend so much time on one part, spend the same amount of time on the other parts, basically, till you have it right. Okay, so that's 3 sentences. It will not little help you to get this without book. To get it without book. It will not little help you to get it without book. Why? God damn, dude. It will not little help you. It helps you little to get it without the book. Okay, so okay, God damn it. Helps you very little if you get it without the book. What does it mean without book? Is book in this instance, is he referring to the book itself, the object, or is he referring to the concept of book, of learning? Will help you little to get it without book, without diligence, or so forth, so on. I guess something like that. For whilst the mind is busy searching here and there for that which is written, the hand is more unapt to perform the note. Inapt, or unapt, okay. And all the difficulty the lute hath. Okay, so the mind is busy looking for the notes, or reading the notes rather, interpreting what is being written. The hand is to play the note and everything else, which for the most part is imputed to the fingers. Okay, so basically moving from the fingers more than anything, more than the hand. So that's interesting. So these guys had, this seems like evidence for really good, smooth technique. In other words, because me and my friends, we kind of have a joke It's like, oh yeah, John Dowland must have been great, but nobody's seen him play. There's no recordings. What if he really sucked and they just had lower standards back then? So but that's just a joke. It is. Yeah, because I think he's referring here. He's hinting at really refined technique in which the hand doesn't move. It's only the fingers, because oftentimes beginners move the hand a lot to avoid using the joints of the fingers, right? And he's talking about which for the most part is imputed to the fingers, right? So the fingers move to the notes. The hands don't move the fingers to the notes. The fingers move themselves, right? For the most part. Should rather be attributed to the variety of the rules. I might need to reread that again. Which are in this respect to be observed, all which do rather depend upon the mind than on the hand. Okay, so you have to be mindful here. You have to do the right technique physically, and you have to keep the mind reading and interpreting correctly, right? So he's just talking about diligence. Be very diligent, be very intentional in what you're learning and what you're playing, and listen to yourself, basically. All right. And there's another paragraph here on the same thing. And although most men do use themselves at the first to the hardest lessons, that afterwards they may have the easier passage, yet would I not persuade young beginners so, for fair least such difficulties should cause loathing in them, and consequently giving over of the practice. All right, so yeah, just don't go over your level. Some people might go to the hardest pieces. They often do that. I know I've done that. When I first started learning the guitar, it's like, okay, I want a Bach piece and I want a Russian piece, and I couldn't play them. But his point is, oftentimes we try to go to the hardest thing, and we become disillusioned, and we tend to give up on things. Practice. Where was I? But I had rather an easier lesson, where set them at first, which is not intricate by reason of many gripes or stops, as you call them. Stops, okay. Gripes, grips. And in displaying whereof one shall not need to lay his fingers cross the neck of the lute. Okay, so he's talking about pieces that are easier as far as technique goes, that don't involve big movements, big shifts in the fingers. And this I would have used until the hand be a little broad in Uda. In Uda. I don't know what that word is. Let me look it up. You. Okay, forming nouns denoting an action, process, or result. Forming nouns denoting an office or function. Censure. Okay. Where was that? And this I would have used until the hand be a little broad in use. It's not an S. U. Okay, so basically do the small pieces until your hands get the hang of it. And in this lesson, I would not have many or diverse changes of the time, for I have known by experience that this hath been more hard to many than all the rest. Wherefore, in taking such lessons, be diligently careful in marking both your hands, which being they are the chief, and that's supposed to be an F or an S. Yeah, it's F. The chief and indeed the instrumental parts of this practice. Okay, so the purpose is your hands, developing your technique. Therefore, the use of them take these precepts hereafter set down, beginning first with the left hand, because that is that is, as it were, the mother of the melody. The other doth unfold the melody conceived, and so sounds it to our ears. Okay, so he's giving preference to the fretting hand as opposed to the plucking hand, and he calls it the left hand. So I guess, for the most part, it was right-handed players. Probably very, very rare to see left-handed players in this time period. Cool. Yeah. So he's saying give priority to the left hand because that's the mother of the melody. Which I guess makes sense because, if you're plucking one string and the finger is not on the note, it's just going to sound like a tut, tut, tut. So that's an interesting point of view. To our ears. All right. And that's the last observation. And here are some... Oh, sorry. Maybe not the last observation, but, one last thing that he talks about before going into exercises. And I will get my lute and play through some of these. Yeah, this is not the end of observations. Necessary observations. Wow, this is really cool. Other necessary observations belong to... Okay, and these are observations by John Dowland. So this is all by Jean... what was his name? Of Vissa? Yeah, this guy. Gian Vertisto Vesardo of Visonti. And then this is Dowland's take on things. Belonging to lute playing. Taking the strings into consideration. I want to really look into this. And then there's fantasies here. And you can see the texture is actually pretty thin, pretty melodic, one-line stuff. Gets a little polyphonic here, 2 voices, 3 voices. But for the most part, it's not a lot. And this is still part of it. It's quite a long piece, especially for a beginner. But that's okay. Cool. All right, let's finish reading this. And then I'm going to call it for the day. Or for the morning, rather. Hey, buddy. What are you doing, monkey? For using both hands together. Wherefore, take special heed lest the right hand touch the strings before the left hand stop them. Oh, interesting. Lest the right hand touch the strings before left hand stops them. So, okay, so he's talking about efficiency of motion here. He's talking about preparing the stroke, right? So do not strike and place at the same time. Have the string ready to be plucked and then set the note and then pluck, right? That basically. So maybe not rest strokes necessarily, but prepared strokes. Yeah, that's what he's talking about. Okay. Stop them and carry your left hand so in holding the neck of the lute before the left hand stop them, and carry your left hand so in holding the neck. Lute with a good grace. Your thumb must be set upon the middle of the back of the neck. Okay, so never show your thumb above the neck if you have a thin neck, that is. Always in the middle. And he's talking because of this technique as opposed to this, which is inefficient motion, right? As opposed to that. So, must be set upon the midst of the back of the neck, which must likewise with the other fingers as they go up and down upon the lute. Okay, so hang on, let me read that again. Wherefore take special heed, lest the right hand touch the strings before the left hand stops them, and carry. Anytime he's talking about stopping the string, he's talking about pressing down on the fret, basically. And carry your left hand so in holding the neck of the lute with a good grace. So pretty much be gentle. Don't hold. Don't have a tense grip. Just be relaxed. Your thumb must be set upon the midst on the back of the neck, which must likewise with the other fingers as they go up and down upon the lute. So basically, the thumb stays in the center as the fingers move vertically on the lute, right? So nothing like this, more like this, right? Even using a little hinging motion, but for the most part, move from the fingers, not from the hand, as he said before. Be gently moved and follow them in the way they go. Wait, hang on. Maybe I misread it. Hang on. Your thumb must be set upon the midst of the back of the neck. Okay, set on the middle of the back of the neck, which must likewise, with other fingers as they go up and down upon the lute, be gently moved and follow them the way they go. Oh, okay, never mind. So he is talking about moving the thumb basically with the fingers. So if you go vertically, as opposed to that, he's talking about this. So I guess maybe it's to keep neutrality of the wrist, maybe. I don't know, but that's what he's describing here, right? Must likewise with the other fingers as they go up and down upon the lute. Your thumb must be set upon the midst of the back of the neck, which must likewise with the other fingers as they go up and down. Oh no, wait a minute. No, he is talking about leaving the thumb in the middle, right? God damn, dude, the wordage here, the diction. Wherefore take special heed, lest the right hand touch the strings before the left hand stop them, and carry your left hand so in holding the neck of the lute with a good grace. That's with a good grace. Your thumb must be set upon the midst of the back of the neck, which must likewise with the other fingers as they go up and down upon the lute. Hang on, when he's talking about up and down, is he talking about vertical motion or horizontal motion? Your thumb must be set upon the middle of the back of the neck, which must likewise with the other fingers as they go up and down upon the lute. Okay, so hang on. So I think it is horizontally. Up and down upon the lute. Not up and down upon the neck, upon the lute. So he's saying it stays in the center as you move horizontally. I think that's correct. Be gently touched, moved, and follow them the way they go. Now, if you would know with which finger every letter is to be stopped, first inquire diligently whether the letter be itself alone or joined with other letters. Okay, so he's talking about vertical chords basically. For if it be alone, then this order must absolutely be kept. The first finger must serve to stop B, for the second C, and the third and fourth for D. Always so that the fourth finger serve to fifth or fourth string, and the third finger the other strings, as for example. Okay, is he talking about, I think he's talking about interchanging the fourth and the third for the third fret, basically. And he's giving us the example. And I was playing this beforehand. So he has A, B, D with the fourth here. So my lute's going to be a little bit out of tune. So B with the first finger and D with the fourth finger. Da, 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 da. And here with the third finger. Second finger with the C. Third finger. Right, so forth, so on. But the letters be set in stops lower than D, then keep the same order, which your fingers must go lower with your hand, and the letter which stands nearest to the bridge, which must be stopped with the little finger, and the other letters which are about with the other fingers, as you may see in examples. Hang on, I'm not really getting this all that much, to be honest. Okay, so now he's talking about pretty much one finger per fret, whereas before it seemed like he was just using the fourth finger on the top two strings. Because I guess it facilitates that movement. Maybe it's because of the length of the ring finger, it's bigger than the third, so something like that, maybe. Interesting. All right. Well, I'm going to stop right here. And I'm going to come back to it. I'm probably going to reread that part and play through this and try to understand this a little bit better. And it looks like that stops here for gripping of stops in B. Okay, yeah. So this is one whole observation. All right. I'll be back in a bit then.